The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of the Quantico training facility as Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez adjusted her grip on the weathered wooden stock of her grandfather's M1 Garand. The rifle, manufactured in 1943, bore the scars of 2 wars and countless training sessions, its metal surfaces worn smooth by decades of faithful service. Around her, the elite members of the Marine Corps' Advanced Sniper School whispered and pointed, their state-of-the-art precision rifles, gleaming with tactical accessories and digital scopes that cost more than most people's cars. "Look at that relic," chuckled Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb, shouldering his custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum, with its carbon fiber stock and computerized ballistics system. "What's next, a musket?" The laughter from his companions echoed across the range, but Elena's weathered hands remained steady on her rifle, her dark eyes focused on the distant targets that would soon determine who among them deserved to wear the coveted sniper badge. Elena Vasquez had traveled a long road to reach this moment. At 34, she was older than most of the candidates, her face bearing the lines of someone who had seen combat in 3 different theaters of operation. Her gray-streaked black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform bore the ribbons of a Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Combat Action Ribbon earned during her 12 years as a Marine Corps infantry specialist. But none of that seemed to matter to the younger Marines who saw only an aging woman with an antique rifle in a world of cutting-edge technology. The mockery had started 3 weeks ago, when Elena first arrived at the Advanced Sniper School. She had been one of only 2 women selected for the prestigious program, a fact that already made her a target for skepticism. When she unpacked her grandfather's rifle instead of checking out one of the modern sniper systems from the armory, the whispers began. Abuela's hunting rifle, some called it. The museum piece, others said. The instructors, all male veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, had raised eyebrows but said nothing officially. After all, the regulations allowed personal weapons as long as they met certain specifications, and Elena's M1 Garand, despite its age, was still a formidable piece of equipment in the right hands. But Elena knew something her critics didn't understand. The rifle she carried wasn't just a weapon, it was a legacy. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Carlos Vasquez, had carried it through the beaches of Normandy and the forests of the Ardennes. He had taught her to shoot with it when she was 12 years old, spending countless summer afternoons in the desert outside Tucson, where she learned to read wind patterns and calculate distance without the aid of modern technology. "A rifle is only as good as the Marine behind it, Mia," he had told her. "All the gadgets in the world can't replace a steady hand and a clear eye." The other candidates at the sniper school carried rifles that could practically aim themselves. Digital scopes with rangefinders, wind meters, and ballistic computers did most of the thinking for them. Their weapons were marvels of modern engineering, capable of precise shots at distances that would have been impossible for previous generations. But Elena's grandfather had taught her to feel the wind on her face, to judge distance by the clarity of her target, to understand her rifle's personality so intimately that she could predict its behavior under any conditions. The Advanced Sniper School was no ordinary training program. It was designed to produce the Marine Corps' most elite marksmen, specialists who could operate independently in hostile territory, taking out high-value targets with surgical precision. The 8-week course had a failure rate of over 60%, and those who survived would join the ranks of fewer than 300 active Marine snipers worldwide. The competition was fierce, with candidates coming from elite units across the corps, each one handpicked for their exceptional shooting ability and tactical acumen. Elena had earned her place through a combination of exceptional marksmanship, scores, and combat experience that few could match. During her deployment to Afghanistan, she had served as a designated marksman with an infantry unit, taking out enemy combatants at ranges that impressed even seasoned veterans. Her commanders had noticed her natural ability and recommended her for sniper training. Despite the unofficial barriers that often kept women from such specialized roles, the facility at Quantico was state-of-the-art, with ranges extending out to 1,500 meters and training scenarios that replicated the conditions snipers would face in real combat. The other candidates had spent thousands of dollars on their equipment, customizing their rifles with the latest technology and accessories. Elena's rifle, by contrast, had cost her grandfather $47 when he bought it from the civilian marksmanship program in 1962. Sergeant Webb, who had quickly established himself as the unofficial leader of the male candidates, made no secret of his disdain for Elena's presence. A former Army Ranger who had transferred to the Marines, he carried himself with the swagger of someone accustomed to being the best shooter in any room. His rifle was a work of art, custom-built by a renowned gunsmith and equipped with optics that could identify targets in almost any lighting condition. He had already made it clear that he considered Elena's presence a politically motivated decision, a box-checking exercise by a corps trying to appear progressive. "I don't know what strings you pulled to get here, Vasquez," Webb had said during their first week, "but this isn't the place for diversity experiments. Lives depend on what we do out there." Elena had responded with silence, focusing on her training while the other candidates nodded their agreement. She had faced similar attitudes throughout her career, from drill instructors who questioned whether women belonged in combat, roles to fellow Marines who assumed her achievements were the result of lowered standards rather than exceptional ability. Training scenarios at the school were designed to push candidates to their limits. They practiced shooting from uncomfortable positions, in adverse weather conditions, and under the stress of simulated combat situations. Elena's grandfather's rifle drew attention in every exercise, its distinctive 8-round clip creating a metallic ping when empty that was audible across the range. The younger Marines found it amusing, particularly when compared to the silent, smooth operation of their bolt-action precision rifles. But Elena's performance spoke for itself, while the other candidates struggled with their complex equipment. In challenging conditions, she adapted quickly to changing circumstances. Her scores were consistently in the top 3, despite shooting with iron sights against opponents using advanced optical systems. The instructors began to take notice, though they said nothing publicly about the woman who could outshoot Marines half her age with a rifle old enough to be their grandfather. The psychological pressure was as intense as the physical demands. Candidates were constantly evaluated, their every move scrutinized by instructors who had seen combat in some of the world's most dangerous places. The failure rate was deliberately high, designed to ensure that only the most capable and mentally resilient Marines earned the sniper designation. Elena understood that she was fighting not just for her own success, but for the future opportunities of women who might follow in her footsteps. During evening hours, while other candidates cleaned their high-tech equipment or studied ballistics tables, Elena would sit alone with her grandfather's rifle, running a cloth over its worn surfaces and checking its mechanics with the intimate knowledge that came from years of familiarity. She could disassemble and reassemble the weapon blindfolded, knowing every spring, pin, and component by feel. The rifle had been her companion through her own deployments, a connection to her grandfather's legacy and a source of confidence in the most challenging situations. The mockery from her fellow candidates had evolved from open derision to grudging puzzlement as Elena's scores remained consistently high. Webb and his supporters had expected her to wash out early, particularly when faced with the demanding physical requirements of the course. But Elena had proven herself capable of keeping up with Marines 10 years younger, her experience and determination compensating for any physical disadvantages. The instructors, led by Chief Warrant Officer James Morrison, maintained strict neutrality in their evaluations, but Elena could sense their growing interest in her unconventional approach. Morrison, a veteran of multiple combat deployments and one of the Corps' most respected sniper instructors, had served alongside Elena's grandfather in Iraq during the early days of the conflict. He understood the quality of training that the older generation could provide, even if he had never said so publicly. As the weeks progressed, the training scenarios became more complex and demanding. Candidates were required to engage targets at extreme ranges, in low light conditions, and while dealing with various environmental challenges. Elena's grandfather's rifle, with its simple but reliable design, proved surprisingly adaptable to these challenges. While other candidates struggled with battery failures, electronic malfunctions, or overly complex adjustment procedures, Elena's weapon functioned with mechanical precision. The facility's 1,500-meter range was considered one of the most challenging in the military, with unpredictable wind patterns and temperature variations that could affect bullet trajectory. Elena had learned to read these conditions through years of practice with her grandfather, developing an almost intuitive understanding of how environmental factors would influence her shots. Her competitors relied on sophisticated equipment to provide this information, but Elena had developed the ability to gather it through careful observation and experience. The competition among the candidates had intensified as the course progressed toward its final evaluations. Rankings were posted weekly, and Elena's consistent presence in the top positions had begun to irritate some of her fellow Marines. Webb, in particular, seemed personally offended by the idea that a woman with an outdated rifle could outperform him and his expensive equipment. His comments had become increasingly pointed, though he was careful to avoid anything that might be considered official harassment. Elena's background had prepared her for this kind of challenge. Growing up in a military family, she had learned early that respect had to be earned through performance rather than granted because of position or connections. Her grandfather had been a tough teacher, demanding excellence and accepting no excuses for substandard performance. Those lessons had served her well throughout her military career, helping her succeed in environments where others questioned her presence. Now, as she stood on the range with her grandfather's rifle, Elena knew that the final test was approaching. The culminating exercise of the Advanced Sniper School would determine which candidates earned the right to call themselves Marine snipers. All the training, all the competition, and all the doubt would come down to a single test of skill, precision, and mental toughness. Elena adjusted her grip on the familiar wooden stock, feeling the connection to her grandfather's legacy and the weight of expectations that came with carrying his rifle into battle once again. The pre-dawn darkness at Quantico held a chill that cut through even the heaviest field jackets as Elena made her way to the equipment shed where her grandfather's rifle waited. 3 days had passed since the precision shooting evaluation, and the results had created an undercurrent of tension that permeated every interaction among the remaining candidates. Elena's performance had not only surprised the instructors, but had fundamentally challenged the assumptions that many of her fellow Marines held about modern warfare and the equipment required to excel in it. Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb had spent those 3 days building a campaign of doubt around Elena's achievements. His approach was subtle but persistent, designed to undermine confidence without crossing the line into official harassment. During equipment inspections, he would make comments about the reliability of vintage weapons under stress. In the chow hall, he would engage other candidates in discussions about the importance of having the most advanced technology available when lives were on the line. His message was clear. Elena's success was an anomaly that couldn't be sustained when the stakes were raised. "I'm just saying," Webb had told a group of candidates over breakfast, "when you're downrange and somebody's shooting back, you want every advantage you can get. This isn't a turkey shoot on Grandpa's farm. This is about bringing Marines home alive." His audience nodded in agreement, their respect for Elena's shooting ability tempered by doubts about her judgment in weapon selection. Webb's reputation as a combat veteran gave his opinions weight, and his carefully crafted arguments played on the natural conservatism of military personnel, who understood that equipment failures could have fatal consequences. The other candidates had begun to distance themselves from Elena in ways that went beyond simple competition. Corporal Jackson Martinez, who had initially been friendly toward her, now avoided making eye contact during training exercises. Staff Sergeant David Kim, a quiet professional who had shown respect for Elena's abilities, seemed increasingly uncomfortable with her presence. Even Private First Class Tommy Rodriguez, the youngest candidate in the group, had begun to echo Webb's concerns about the wisdom of relying on outdated equipment in modern combat situations. Elena understood the psychology behind their behavior. Military culture emphasized conformity and adherence to proven methods, and her grandfather's rifle represented a deviation from accepted norms that made her colleagues uncomfortable. The fact that she was outperforming them with equipment they considered obsolete challenged their understanding of what constituted professional competence. Rather than questioning their own assumptions, it was easier to dismiss her success as luck or to predict that it wouldn't continue under more challenging conditions. The social isolation didn't surprise Elena, but it did remind her of similar experiences throughout her career. She had learned early that exceptional performance by women in male-dominated fields often generated resentment rather than respect. Her success was frequently attributed to factors other than ability, lowered standards, special treatment, or simple luck. The pattern had repeated itself in every unit she had served with, from her early days as a private to her current position as a staff sergeant with multiple combat deployments. Chief Warrant Officer Morrison had maintained his professional distance since their brief conversation 3 days earlier, but Elena had noticed subtle changes in his behavior during training exercises. He spent more time observing her shooting positions and techniques, occasionally asking questions about her sight alignment or breathing control that seemed designed to understand her methods rather than correct them. His interest was professional rather than personal, but it suggested that he was beginning to recognize something in her approach that went beyond simple marksmanship ability. The other instructors had also begun to pay closer attention to Elena's performance. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Williams, the school's only female instructor, had started incorporating some of Elena's techniques into her lessons on shooting fundamentals. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, who taught advanced ballistics, had asked Elena to demonstrate her method for judging wind conditions using only visual cues. The attention was subtle but significant, indicating that the instructors were beginning to see value in the old-school methods that Elena's grandfather had taught her. Elena's weapon maintenance routine had become a source of both fascination and mockery among the other candidates. Each evening, she would meticulously disassemble her grandfather's rifle, cleaning each component with the care that comes from understanding the mechanical complexity of a weapon that had been designed for battlefield conditions in an era when soldiers couldn't rely on sophisticated support systems. The process took longer than the maintenance required for modern rifles, but Elena found it meditative and reassuring. Webb had made the maintenance routine a target for his subtle campaign of undermining Elena's credibility. "Look at all that work just to keep that thing running," he would say to anyone within earshot. "Meanwhile, we're ready to go at a moment's notice. What happens when she's downrange and doesn't have 2 hours to clean her rifle?" His comments were designed to plant seeds of doubt about Elena's practical suitability for combat operations, suggesting that her methods were impractical for real-world applications. The advanced sniper school's curriculum was designed to simulate the conditions that Marine snipers would face in combat situations around the world. The training scenarios incorporated environmental challenges ranging from desert heat to Arctic cold, urban environments, to dense jungle terrain. Elena's grandfather's rifle had been tested in similar conditions during World War II and the Korean War, but the other candidates questioned whether its reliability would hold up to the demands of modern warfare. Elena's background had prepared her for these challenges in ways that her critics didn't understand. Her grandfather had served in multiple theaters during his career, facing environmental extremes that tested both his equipment and his abilities. He had taught Elena to understand her rifle's behavior under different conditions, to recognize the subtle changes in performance that could affect accuracy, and to make adjustments based on experience rather than electronic assistance. The rifle itself was a testament to American manufacturing excellence from an era when weapons were built to last for decades rather than being replaced every few years. Its gas-operated action was simple but robust, designed to function reliably with minimal maintenance even under adverse conditions. The wooden stock, while heavier than modern synthetic materials, provided stability and durability that had been proven in combat across multiple continents in conflicts. Elena had modified the rifle only minimally over the years, adding a leather sling that her grandfather had crafted himself and adjusting the trigger to her personal preferences. The iron sights were original equipment, maintained to factory specifications, and adjusted through years of practice to provide the precision required for long-range shooting. Every component had been selected for reliability rather than convenience, reflecting a philosophy that prioritized function over form. The contrast between Elena's approach and that of her fellow candidates was stark. While they relied on electronic systems to provide information about range, wind conditions, and ballistic calculations, Elena had developed the ability to gather this information through observation and experience. Her grandfather had taught her to read the environment like a book, using visual cues and physical sensations to make the calculations that others delegated to their equipment. Webb's rifle represented the opposite philosophy, incorporating every technological advancement available to the modern sniper. His scope could calculate range automatically, adjust for environmental conditions, and even provide ballistic solutions for different ammunition types. The rifle itself was a precision instrument, custom-built to tolerances that exceeded military specifications and equipped with accessories that optimized its performance for specific scenarios. The philosophical difference between the two approaches reflected broader changes in military thinking over the past several decades. Modern warfare emphasized technological superiority and the integration of advanced systems to provide overwhelming advantages over less sophisticated opponents. Elena's grandfather had served in an era when individual skill and equipment reliability were more important than technological sophistication. The training environment at Quantico provided numerous opportunities for both approaches to be tested. The ranges incorporated realistic scenarios that challenged candidates to perform under stress while dealing with environmental variables that could affect their accuracy. Elena's consistent performance had demonstrated that her methods were not only viable but potentially superior to more modern approaches under certain conditions. The social dynamics among the candidates had evolved into a clear division between those who supported Webb's position and those who remained neutral. Elena found herself increasingly isolated, eating meals alone and spending her free time in solitary preparation for the next day's training. The isolation was not entirely unwelcome, as it allowed her to focus on her preparation without the distractions of social interaction. Elena's mental preparation routine had been developed through years of combat experience and refined through her grandfather's teachings. She would spend time each evening visualizing the next day's training scenarios, mentally rehearsing her shooting positions, and considering the environmental factors that might affect her performance. The process was as important as the physical preparation, allowing her to approach each challenge with confidence and clarity. The pressure was building toward the final evaluation phase, which would determine the ultimate rankings of the candidates. Elena understood that her performance in the precision shooting evaluation had raised expectations and created additional scrutiny of her abilities. The remaining phases would test different skills, and she couldn't assume that her success would continue without exceptional preparation and execution. Webb's campaign of doubt had achieved its intended effect among some of the candidates, but Elena had noticed that others were beginning to question his motives. Corporal Sarah Chun, one of the newer candidates, had started asking Elena questions about her shooting techniques during training breaks. Lance Corporal Anthony Washington had begun observing Elena's maintenance routine with curiosity rather than mockery. The Cracks and Webs Coalition suggested that performance was beginning to speak louder than prejudice. The instructor's evolving attitude toward Elena was perhaps the most significant development since the precision shooting evaluation. Their initial skepticism had given way to professional interest, and some were beginning to incorporate her techniques into their instruction. The recognition from experienced combat veterans carried weight that went beyond simple validation, suggesting that Elena's methods had practical applications that deserved serious consideration. As Elena prepared for the next phase of evaluation, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The path had been longer and more difficult than it might have been for a male candidate, but it had also prepared her for the challenges that lay ahead. Her grandfather's training had given her more than just shooting skills. It had taught her patience, persistence, and the confidence that comes from knowing that ability ultimately speaks louder than prejudice. The faded photograph Elena pulled from her breast pocket showed a younger version of her grandfather, Master Sergeant Carlos Vasquez, standing beside a group of Marines in the Pacific Theater during 1944. His weathered face bore the same determined expression that Elena remembered from her childhood, and the M1 Garand slung across his shoulder was the same rifle that now rested across her knees. The image had been taken just days before the Battle of Saipan, where Carlos had earned his first Silver Star for actions that would become legendary within the sniper community. Elena's connection to her grandfather's legacy ran deeper than simple family pride. Carlos Vasquez had been one of the Marine Corps' most decorated marksmen, credited with over 90 confirmed kills during his service in the Pacific Theater. His techniques had been developed through necessity rather than formal training, refined through combat experience that taught him to see opportunities that others missed. The rifle he carried had been his constant companion through some of the most brutal fighting of the war, modified only by the addition of a leather sling he had. Crafted from captured Japanese equipment, the story of how Elena had inherited the rifle was one she had never shared with her fellow candidates. Carlos had been diagnosed with cancer during Elena's final year of high school, and the doctors had given him 6 months to live. Instead of accepting the prognosis, he had spent those months teaching Elena everything he knew about marksmanship, fieldcraft, and the mental discipline required to excel under pressure. Their training sessions in the Arizona desert had become increasingly intensive as his condition worsened, driven by his determination to pass on skills that had kept him alive through 4 years of combat. "A rifle is just a tool, Mia," Carlos had told her during one of their last sessions together. "The real weapon is up here," he had said, tapping his temple with a gnarled finger. "You can have the fanciest equipment in the world, but if you don't understand what you're doing with it, you're just making expensive noise." The lesson had stayed with Elena throughout her military career, influencing her approach to every challenge she had faced. Carlos had survived his cancer for 18 months longer than predicted, defying medical expectations through sheer force of will and the desire to complete Elena's training. He had lived to see her graduate from boot camp and complete her initial military occupation specialty training, passing away peacefully in his sleep just weeks before Elena's first deployment. The rifle had been his final gift to her, along with a collection of field notes and training materials that he had compiled over decades of service. The training materials Carlos had left behind were unlike anything Elena had encountered in formal military instruction. His notes contained detailed observations about wind patterns, environmental conditions, and shooting techniques that he had developed through trial and error in combat situations. The margins were filled with sketches and calculations that revealed the methodical approach he had taken to understanding every aspect of long-range shooting. Elena had studied these materials religiously, incorporating her grandfather's insights into her own approach to marksmanship. One of the most valuable lessons Carlos had taught Elena was the importance of understanding her weapon's individual characteristics. Every rifle, he had explained, had its own personality, subtle variations in performance that could only be learned through extensive practice and careful observation. The M1 Garand Elena carried had been Carlos's primary weapon for over 4 years of combat, and he had documented its behavior under virtually every condition imaginable. The rifle's modifications were minimal but significant. Carlos had adjusted the trigger pull to exactly 3.5 pounds, the optimal weight for precision shooting without sacrificing reliability. He had hand-fitted the stock to his own dimensions, creating a perfect interface between shooter and weapon that eliminated any inconsistencies in positioning. The iron sights had been precisely calibrated for the specific ammunition type that Carlos preferred, with detailed notes about adjustments required for different environmental conditions. Elena's marksmanship ability had been evident from her first day at the shooting range during boot camp. Her drill instructors had been impressed by her natural accuracy and smooth shooting technique, but they had attributed her success to good coaching rather than exceptional talent. Elena had never mentioned her grandfather's training, preferring to let her performance speak for itself rather than trading on family connections or military heritage. The decision to bring Carlos's rifle to the advanced sniper school had not been made lightly. Elena understood that using non-standard equipment would draw attention and potentially create problems with instructors who preferred uniformity in their training programs. However, she also knew that the rifle represented her best chance of success, embodying decades of refinement and proven combat effectiveness that no modern weapon could match. The rifle's history extended beyond Carlos's service record. Elena had researched its serial number and discovered that it had been manufactured at the Springfield Armory in 1943, part of a production run that had equipped Marines fighting in the Pacific Theater. The weapon had seen action in multiple campaigns from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, accumulating battle damage that had been carefully repaired by military armorers. Each scar told a story of survival and adaptation under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Carlos had shared some of these stories with Elena during their training sessions, describing specific engagements where the rifle's reliability had made the difference between life and death. He had talked about shooting in tropical conditions that turned metal components into rust traps, desert environments that filled mechanisms with sand and grit, and Arctic conditions that made steel brittle and unpredictable. The rifle had functioned flawlessly through all of these challenges, earning Carlos's complete trust and confidence. The emotional connection Elena felt to her grandfather's rifle went beyond simple sentiment. The weapon represented a direct link to a tradition of excellence that had been maintained through generations of Marine marksmen. Carlos had been taught by veterans of World War I who had learned their skills from Spanish-American War veterans, creating an unbroken chain of knowledge that stretched back to the earliest days of American military marksmanship. Elena's childhood had been filled with stories of her grandfather's military service, but it wasn't until she began her own career that she truly understood the significance of his achievements. Carlos had served during an era when individual skill and equipment reliability were more important than technological sophistication, when Marines had to depend on their training and judgment rather than electronic systems. His success had been built on fundamental principles that remained relevant regardless of technological advances. The training techniques Carlos had developed were based on careful observation of environmental conditions and a deep understanding of ballistics principles. He had taught Elena to read wind patterns by watching grass movement, dust clouds, and the behavior of birds in flight. Range estimation came through practice with known distances, developing the ability to judge space accurately without electronic assistance. Ballistic calculations were performed mentally, using mathematical principles that had been refined through Years of practical application. Elena's approach to equipment maintenance reflected her grandfather's philosophy of self-reliance and attention to detail. Carlos had taught her to understand every component of her rifle, to recognize the subtle signs of wear or damage that could affect performance, and to perform repairs using basic tools and field-expedient materials. The skills he had passed on were designed to ensure that a Marine could maintain combat effectiveness even when separated from formal support systems. The contrast between Elena's background and that of her fellow candidates was stark. Most of them had learned to shoot using modern training methods that emphasized technological assistance and standardized procedures. Their experience with equipment maintenance was limited to basic cleaning and inspection, with major repairs handled by specialized technicians. Elena's ability to diagnose and correct mechanical problems with her rifle was a skill that set her apart from her contemporaries. The philosophical differences between old school and modern approaches to marksmanship were becoming increasingly apparent as the advanced sniper school progressed. Elena's methods emphasized adaptation and improvisation, skills that Carlos had learned through necessity during combat operations. Her fellow candidates relied on standardized procedures and electronic systems that provided consistent results under controlled conditions, but might fail when faced with unexpected challenges. Carlos's influence on Elena's mental approach to shooting was perhaps even more significant than his technical instruction. He had taught her to remain calm under pressure, to trust her training when faced with uncertainty, and to maintain confidence even when others questioned her abilities. These psychological skills had been developed through combat experience that had tested every aspect of his character and resolve. The legacy Carlos had left behind extended beyond marksmanship techniques to include a broader understanding of what it meant to be a Marine. He had emphasized the importance of honor, courage, and commitment, values that had guided his actions throughout his military career. Elena had internalized these principles, using them as a foundation for her own approach to military service and professional development. Elena's decision to follow in her grandfather's footsteps had not been automatic. She had considered other career paths, including college and civilian employment, but had ultimately chosen military service as a way to honor his memory and continue the family tradition. The choice had led to challenges and opportunities that had shaped her into the Marine she had become, preparing her for the ultimate test that awaited at the advanced sniper school, the weight of carrying on. Carlos's legacy was something Elena felt keenly as she prepared for the final evaluation phases. She understood that her performance would be judged not only on its own merits, but also as a reflection of the training and values he had instilled in her. The responsibility was both motivating and intimidating, driving her to achieve excellence while creating pressure that could potentially interfere with her performance. As Elena carefully folded the photograph and returned it to her pocket, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path had been long and sometimes difficult, marked by challenges that had tested her resolve and determination. But it had also been guided by the wisdom and experience of a man who had faced similar challenges and emerged victorious, leaving behind a legacy that continued to inspire and instruct even decades after his death. The tactical operations briefing room at Quantico buzzed with nervous energy as the 12 remaining candidates filed in for the announcement of the final evaluation. Exercise. Chief Warrant Officer Morrison stood at the front of the room beside a large tactical map that showed the sprawling training area where their ultimate test would take place. The map revealed a complex terrain of rolling hills, dense woodland, and open fields that would challenge every skill the candidates had developed over the past 7 weeks. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of combat experience, "what you're about to undertake is the most comprehensive evaluation in the Marine Corps' sniper program. The ultimate challenge will test everything you've learned and determine who among you has what it takes to wear the Scout Sniper badge. The room fell silent as the candidates absorbed the gravity of the moment, each one understanding that their military careers hung in the balance. Morrison gestured to the map behind him, indicating specific locations with a laser pointer. You will be inserted at dawn into a 20-square-mile training area that replicates the conditions you might face in any theater of operations around the world. Your mission is to locate and neutralize 12 high-value targets positioned throughout the area, while avoiding detection by a hunter-killer team comprised of experienced scout snipers. The complexity of the scenario was immediately apparent to everyone in the room. Each target engagement must be made from a minimum distance of 600 meters. Morrison continued, and you must document each shot with photographic evidence before moving to the next position. The exercise will last 48 hours, during which time you will receive no support or assistance from instructors. You will carry only the equipment you can personally transport, and you must survive on the rations and water you bring with you. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she absorbed the details of the challenge. This was exactly the type of scenario where her grandfather's training would provide its greatest advantage. The emphasis on self-reliance, adaptability, and old-school fieldcraft skills played directly to her strengths while potentially exposing weaknesses in candidates who had become too dependent on modern technology and support systems. Sergeant Webb raised his hand, his expression confident despite the daunting nature of the challenge. Chief, what about weather conditions? The forecast is calling for rain and possible thunderstorms over the next 2 days. Morrison nodded, acknowledging the question. The weather is part of the test, Sergeant. A scout sniper must be able to operate effectively regardless of environmental conditions. You'll adapt or you'll fail. The briefing continued with specific details about communications protocols, emergency procedures, and the rules of engagement that would govern the exercise. Each candidate would be tracked via GPS for safety purposes, but the tracking information would not be shared with the hunter-killer team until a candidate was eliminated or requested extraction. The exercise was designed to be as realistic as possible while maintaining appropriate safety margins. Elena took careful notes as Morrison outlined the scoring criteria. Points would be awarded for successful target engagements, with bonuses for difficult shots and penalties for missed opportunities. Additional points could be earned for exceptional fieldcraft, including successful evasion of the hunter-killer team and efficient movement between target locations. The scoring system was complex enough to ensure that raw marksmanship ability alone would not guarantee success. The equipment inspection that followed the briefing revealed the stark differences in approach among the candidates. Webb's gear represented the pinnacle of modern military technology, with advanced optics, electronic navigation systems, and lightweight materials that maximized capability while minimizing weight. His rifle case alone contained backup systems and specialized accessories that cost more than most Marines earned in a month. Elena's equipment load was noticeably different from her competitors. Her grandfather's M1 Garand, while reliable, was significantly heavier than the modern precision rifles carried by the other candidates. She compensated for this disadvantage by carrying fewer backup systems and specialized accessories, relying instead on her ability to adapt and improvise when faced with equipment limitations. Her approach reflected the philosophy Carlos had taught her. Simplicity and reliability were more valuable than complexity and sophistication. The other candidates had spent considerable time and money optimizing their equipment loads for the specific challenges they expected to face. Night vision devices, electronic rangefinders, ballistic computers, and advanced communication systems filled their packs alongside specialized ammunition and precision-manufactured accessories. Elena's pack contained the basics: food, water, ammunition, and the simple tools required to maintain her rifle under field conditions. Corporal Martinez approached Elena during the equipment inspection, curiosity evident in his expression. "Vasquez, I've got to ask, Are you really planning to carry that heavy rifle for 48 hours through rough terrain? That thing has to weigh twice what our rifles do." Elena smiled slightly, checking the balance of her grandfather's weapon. "Weight is relative, Martinez. I've been carrying this rifle for years. It feels natural to me." Staff Sergeant Kim overheard the conversation and joined in, shaking his head in disbelief. "I respect what you did on the range, Elena, but this is different. We're talking about tactical movement, concealment, and precision shooting under extreme stress. That antique might have been fine for your grandfather's war, but modern combat requires modern solutions." Elena listened politely, but said nothing. Understanding that her response would come through performance rather than argument, the pre-mission briefing included detailed weather forecasts that confirmed Webb's earlier concerns. A major storm system was approaching the area, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and the possibility of severe thunderstorms. The conditions would make an already challenging exercise even more difficult. Testing equipment reliability and the candidate's ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. Elena had experienced similar weather conditions during her deployments, and she knew that her grandfather's rifle would perform reliably even in the worst conditions. The M1 Garand had been designed for use in the Pacific Theater, where Marines faced tropical storms, monsoon rains, and humidity levels that could destroy more delicate equipment. Carlos had taught her to trust the weapon's robust construction and simple operating system when faced with environmental challenges. The final equipment check revealed that Elena would be carrying nearly 15 pounds, more weight than the average candidate due to her rifle and the additional ammunition required for its larger caliber. The other candidates were using precision ammunition that was lighter and more compact, while Elena's .3006 cartridges were heavier and took up more space in her pack. The weight disadvantage would affect her mobility and endurance throughout the exercise. Morrison gathered the candidates for final instructions as the sun began to set over the training area. "You have until 0500 hours to complete your final preparations. Transportation to the insertion point will begin at 0530, and the exercise will commence at dawn. Remember that your performance over the next 48 hours will determine not only your success in this course, but also your future opportunities within the Marine Corps sniper community." The evening preparation period was marked by intense focus and nervous energy as each candidate made final adjustments to their equipment and reviewed their tactical plans. Elena spent time studying the topographical map, identifying potential shooting positions and movement routes that would allow her to engage targets, while minimizing exposure to the hunter-killer team. Her grandfather's training had emphasized the importance of thorough preparation and mental rehearsal before any mission. Webb and his supporters gathered in one corner of the preparation area, sharing equipment and discussing tactical approaches. In hushed tones, their conversation occasionally included disparaging comments about Elena's chances of success, predictions that the weight of her rifle would slow her down and limit her effectiveness. Elena ignored the commentary, focusing instead on her own preparation and the lessons her grandfather had taught her about maintaining concentration under pressure. The psychological pressure of the impending evaluation was evident in the behavior of all the candidates. Some engaged in nervous chatter, while others retreated into silent contemplation. Elena fell into the latter category, using meditation techniques that Carlos had taught her to center her mind and prepare for the challenges ahead. The ability to remain calm and focused under extreme stress was one of the most valuable skills a sniper could possess. As the night wore on, Elena methodically checked and rechecked her equipment, following a routine that had become second nature. Through years of practice, each component was inspected for proper function, and backup plans were considered for potential equipment failures. The process was both practical and psychological, providing reassurance that she was as prepared as possible for whatever challenges the exercise might present. The other candidates were making similar preparations, but Elena noticed that many of them seemed to be struggling with the complexity of their equipment. Modern military gear offered tremendous capabilities, but it also required extensive knowledge and maintenance to function properly. Elena's simpler approach eliminated many potential failure points while providing the reliability that had kept her grandfather alive through 4 years of combat. The final hours before insertion were marked by a growing sense of anticipation and determination. Elena knew that this exercise would be the ultimate test of everything she had learned, both from her grandfather's training and from her own military experience. The next 48 hours would determine whether the old-school methods Carlos had taught her could compete with the modern approaches favored by her fellow candidates. As Elena made her final preparations, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path had been challenging, marked by skepticism and dismissal from those who couldn't see past her unconventional approach. But it had also been guided by the wisdom and experience of a man who had faced similar challenges and emerged victorious, leaving behind a legacy that continued to inspire and instruct even decades after his death. The weight of carrying on that legacy was something Elena felt keenly as she prepared for the most important test of her military career. She understood that her performance would be judged not only on its own merits, but also as a reflection of the training and values Carlos had instilled in her. The responsibility was both motivating and intimidating, driving her to achieve excellence, while creating pressure that could potentially interfere with her performance. Morrison's voice cut through the preparation area as he announced the final call for rest. Lights out in 30 minutes. Get whatever sleep you can. Tomorrow will test everything you've learned and determine who among you has what it takes to be a Marine Scout sniper. Elena nodded, understanding that the next few hours of rest would be crucial for her performance in the days ahead. The first drops of rain began falling as Elena moved through the dense undergrowth of the training area, her grandfather's rifle slung across her back in a position that distributed its weight evenly across her shoulders. 6 hours into the ultimate challenge, she had already located and engaged 3 of the 12 targets, each shot placed with the precision that had become her trademark. The approaching storm system was creating wind conditions that would challenge even the most advanced ballistic computers, but Elena felt confident in her ability to read the environmental signs that Carlos had taught her to interpret. Her current position overlooked a valley where intelligence reports indicated the 4th target was located. Through her binoculars, Elena could see the elevated hide site approximately 800 meters away, partially concealed by natural vegetation, but visible to someone who knew what to look for. The target was positioned to test the candidates' ability to identify camouflaged positions and engage them at extended range under deteriorating weather conditions. Elena settled into a prone shooting position behind a fallen log, using the natural cover to break up her silhouette while providing a stable platform for her rifle. The M1 Garand's iron sights required more careful positioning than the high magnification scopes used by her competitors, but they also provided a wider field of view that helped her maintain situational awareness. Carlos had taught her that tunnel vision was one of the greatest dangers a sniper could face, and his training emphasized the importance of staying alert to the broader tactical situation. The wind had picked up significantly since her last shot, and Elena could see the storm clouds building on the horizon. She studied the vegetation between her position and the target, noting the movement patterns of grass and leaves that would help her estimate wind speed and direction. The techniques Carlos had taught her for reading environmental conditions were based on decades of practical experience, refined through trial and error in combat situations where electronic systems were not available. Elena's first 3 shots of the day had been textbook examples of precision marksmanship, each one finding its mark despite challenging conditions. The first target, engaged at dawn from 600 meters, had been a straightforward shot that allowed her to verify her rifle's 0 and build confidence for the more difficult engagements ahead. The second target, positioned at 700 meters in a simulated urban environment, had required careful consideration of wind deflection and bullet drop. The third target, engaged from a temporary position while moving between locations, had tested her ability to make rapid calculations under time pressure. Each successful engagement had been documented with digital photographs as required by the exercise parameters, and Elena had carefully recorded the details of each shot in her field notebook. The documentation process was time-consuming, but essential for post-exercise analysis and scoring. Elena's methodical approach to record-keeping reflected her grandfather's emphasis on learning from every shooting opportunity, whether in training or combat. The rain was beginning to fall more steadily now, creating conditions that would test the reliability of both equipment and technique. Elena's competitors were likely struggling with water damage to their electronic systems, but her grandfather's rifle had been designed to function in far worse conditions. The M1 Garand's robust construction and simple operating system made it less susceptible to environmental interference than more complex weapon systems. Elena adjusted her position slightly, finding a more comfortable angle that would allow her to maintain steady aim despite the increasing wind. The shot she was contemplating would be one of the most challenging of the exercise, requiring precise calculation of multiple environmental factors and perfect execution under pressure. The target was positioned at the maximum effective range of her rifle, and the deteriorating weather conditions were making the engagement increasingly difficult. Through her binoculars, Elena could see movement in the target area that suggested one of her competitors was also attempting to engage the same objective. The rules of the exercise allowed multiple candidates to engage the same target, but only the first successful hit would receive full credit. Elena knew that she was likely competing against Webb or one of his supporters, Marines who had consistently demonstrated their marksmanship abilities throughout the course. The psychological pressure of the competition was intense, but Elena had learned to channel that stress into improved focus and concentration. Carlos had taught her that pressure was a privilege, a sign that she was being tested at the highest level of her profession. The techniques he had shared for managing stress under combat conditions were serving her well in this training environment, allowing her to maintain the mental clarity required for precision shooting. Elena's approach to the ultimate challenge differed significantly from that of her competitors. While they relied on sophisticated equipment to provide ballistic solutions and environmental data, Elena was using skills that had been developed through years of practice and observation. Her grandfather's training had emphasized the importance of understanding fundamental principles rather than depending on technological assistance that might fail at critical moments. The weight of her rifle, which had been a source of concern for the other candidates, was actually proving to be an advantage in the windy conditions. The M1 Garand's substantial mass helped dampen the effects of wind-induced movement, providing a more stable shooting platform than the lighter weapons carried by her competitors. Elena had learned to use the rifle's weight as a tool rather than viewing it as a handicap, incorporating its characteristics into her shooting technique. Elena's movement between target locations had been carefully planned to minimize exposure to the hunter-killer team while maximizing opportunities for successful engagements. Her route selection was based on terrain analysis techniques that Carlos had taught her, emphasizing the use of natural cover and concealment rather than relying on camouflage equipment. The ability to move undetected through hostile territory was one of the most important skills a sniper could possess. The rain was now falling steadily, creating a gentle but persistent drumming sound that would help mask the noise of Elena's movement. She had positioned herself upwind of the target area, using the natural sound of rain and wind to cover any sound she might make during her approach or withdrawal. The acoustic considerations were an important part of sniper tactics that many candidates overlooked in their focus on ballistic calculations. Elena's field notebook contained detailed observations about wind patterns, temperature changes, and other environmental factors that she had recorded throughout the day. The information would be valuable for future engagements, but it also served as a backup system in case her primary methods of environmental assessment failed. Carlos had taught her that redundancy was essential for survival in combat situations, and she had applied this principle to every aspect of her preparation. The target Elena was preparing to engage was positioned in a way that would test her ability to identify the exact location of the objective while dealing with camouflage and natural concealment. The exercise designers had used sophisticated techniques to hide the target, requiring candidates to use their observation skills and knowledge of enemy tactics to locate the precise point of aim. Elena's training in target identification was based on principles that Carlos had learned through combat experience in the Pacific Theater. Elena's breathing control technique was automatic now, the result of thousands of hours of practice that had made proper respiratory rhythm second nature. She settled into the natural respiratory pause that preceded each shot, allowing her body to find its optimal stability point. The technique was simple but effective, requiring no equipment or technological assistance to implement successfully. The wind was gusting now, creating variable conditions that would challenge even the most sophisticated ballistic computers. Elena watched the movement of grass and leaves at different distances, building a mental map of wind patterns that would affect her bullet's trajectory. The technique required patience and careful observation, but it provided more accurate information than electronic systems that could only measure conditions at the shooter's position. Elena's final check of her rifle's condition revealed that it was functioning perfectly despite the challenging environmental conditions. The M1 Garand's simple but robust design had proven its reliability through decades of use in combat situations around the world. Carlos had taught her to trust the weapon's mechanical systems while maintaining the vigilance required to identify potential problems before they could affect her performance. The moment of truth was approaching as Elena prepared to take her most challenging shot of the day. The target was barely visible through the rain and wind, requiring her to use every skill Carlos had taught her about precision shooting under adverse conditions. The shot would test not only her marksmanship ability, but also her confidence in the old-school methods that had served her grandfather so well in combat. Elena's finger found the trigger of her grandfather's rifle, taking up the slack with the smooth motion that had become automatic through years of practice. The shot would either confirm her position among the top candidates or potentially eliminate her from contention for the Scout Sniper badge. The weight of expectation was enormous, but Elena had learned to convert pressure into focus, using the stress of the moment to sharpen her concentration rather than interfere with her performance. The crack of Elena's rifle echoed across the valley as her shot found its mark, the distinctive sound of the M1 Garand cutting through the storm like a thunderclap. Through her iron sights, she watched the target indicator flip, confirming another successful engagement at 800 meters in conditions that would have challenged the most advanced electronic systems. The shot had required every technique Carlos had taught her about reading wind patterns and compensating for environmental factors, but the fundamentals had held true despite the deteriorating weather. Elena immediately began her withdrawal from the shooting position, following the tactical movement procedures her grandfather had drilled into her during their training sessions in the Arizona desert. The successful engagement had been the fourth of 12 required targets, putting her ahead of the timeline she had established for completing the exercise. However, she knew that the remaining targets would be progressively more challenging, and the approaching storm system would make accurate shooting increasingly difficult. The rain was now falling heavily, creating streams of water that ran down Elena's face and made visibility challenging even at close range. Her grandfather's rifle showed no signs of malfunction despite the harsh conditions, its robust construction proving its value in the field environment, where reliability was more important than sophistication. Elena had prepared for these conditions by applying a thin layer of oil to critical components, following maintenance. Procedures that Carlos had learned through bitter experience in the Pacific Theater. As Elena moved through the dense forest toward her next objective, she caught sight of another candidate, approximately 300 meters to her east. The Marine was struggling with what appeared to be an equipment malfunction, repeatedly manipulating the controls of his electronic scope while glancing nervously at the sky. Elena recognized the figure as Corporal Martinez, one of the candidates, who had expressed doubts about her equipment choices during the pre-exercise briefing. The rules of the Ultimate Challenge prohibited candidates from providing assistance to competitors, but Elena could see that Martinez was experiencing serious difficulties with his high-tech rifle system. Water had apparently penetrated the electronics, causing the digital display to malfunction and leaving him unable to engage targets at extended range. The irony was not lost on Elena as she watched a Marine with thousands of dollars worth of advanced equipment struggle with problems that would never affect her grandfather's mechanical systems. Elena's route to the fifth target took her through a section of terrain that the exercise designers had specifically chosen to test the candidates' fieldcraft abilities. The area was under observation by members of the hunter-killer team, experienced scout snipers who would eliminate any candidate they detected. Elena's movement techniques were based on principles that Carlos had learned through necessity during combat operations, emphasizing patience and careful observation over speed and aggression. The hunter-killer team represented one of the most challenging aspects of the Ultimate Challenge, adding a realistic element of danger that simulated the conditions scout snipers would face in actual combat situations. Elena knew that several candidates had already been eliminated by the team. Their GPS beacons activated when they were spotted by the experienced Marines who were hunting them. The psychological pressure of being hunted while simultaneously trying to complete the mission objectives was intense. Elena's approach to evading the hunter-killer team was methodical and deliberate, based on movement techniques that Carlos had developed through years of operating behind enemy lines. She used natural terrain features to mask her movement, timing her advances to coincide with wind gusts that would cover any sounds she might make. The techniques were time-consuming but effective, allowing her to maintain her position in the exercise while her competitors were being eliminated one by one. The fifth target was positioned in an area that would test the candidate's ability to engage objectives while under direct observation by enemy forces. The scenario was designed to simulate the conditions scout snipers might face when tasked with eliminating high-value targets in hostile territory. Elena's approach would need to be perfect, as any mistake would result in detection and elimination from the exercise. Elena spent nearly an hour conducting reconnaissance of the target area, using techniques that Carlos had taught her for gathering intelligence without exposing herself to enemy observation. Her binoculars revealed the target's location, but she also identified two members of the hunter-killer team, positioned to intercept candidates attempting to engage the objective. The tactical problem was complex, requiring her to neutralize the target while avoiding detection by the experienced Marines who were waiting for her. The solution Elena developed was based on a technique her grandfather had used during the Battle of Iwo Jima, when he had been tasked with eliminating a Japanese sniper who was positioned in a heavily defended area. Carlos had used misdirection and patience to create an opportunity for a successful engagement, waiting for the perfect moment when enemy attention was focused elsewhere. Elena decided to apply the same principles to her current situation. Elena's patience was rewarded when a commotion in the distance drew the attention of the hunter-killer team members. Another candidate had apparently been detected while attempting to engage a different target, and the sounds of his elimination were audible across the training area. Elena used the distraction to move into position for her shot, knowing that she would have only seconds to complete the engagement. Before the team refocused their attention on her area, the shot Elena took was one of the most challenging of her Military career, requiring precise calculation of multiple variables under extreme time pressure. The target was positioned at 900 meters, near the maximum effective range of her rifle, and the continuing storm was creating wind conditions that changed from second to second. Elena drew upon every technique Carlos had taught her, reading the environmental signs with the skill that came from years of practice and observation. The successful engagement of the fifth target put Elena ahead of schedule and demonstrated that her grandfather's methods could compete with modern techniques even under the most challenging conditions. The shot had been observed by one of the exercise supervisors, who made notes on his evaluation form that would contribute to Elena's final score. Elena knew that her performance was being scrutinized more closely than that of her competitors, but she had learned to use that pressure as motivation rather than allowing it to interfere with her concentration. Elena's movement to the sixth target location took her through an area where she encountered evidence of another candidate's passage. Boot prints in the mud and disturbed vegetation indicated that someone had moved through the area recently, but Elena could also see signs that the individual had been careless with their fieldcraft. The tracks were deep and widely spaced, suggesting rapid movement that would have been easily detected by the hunter-killer team. The discovery of the tracks reminded Elena of lessons Carlos had taught her about learning from other people's mistakes. He had emphasized that successful snipers studied the failures of others, using that knowledge to avoid similar errors in their own operations. Elena took careful note of the tactical mistakes she observed, filing the information away for future reference while ensuring that her own movement techniques remained sound. The sixth target was positioned in a location that would test the candidate's ability to engage objectives from unconventional shooting positions. The scenario required Elena to fire from a standing position at 700 meters, a challenging shot that would test her ability to maintain stability without the benefit of a solid rest. The technique was one that Carlos had practiced extensively, understanding that combat conditions often prevented snipers from assuming ideal shooting positions. Elena's preparation for the unconventional shot involved techniques that her grandfather had developed for shooting from unstable positions. She used her rifle sling to create additional stability, wrapping it around her arm in a configuration that provided support without restricting her movement. The technique was simple but effective, requiring no additional equipment while significantly improving her accuracy from standing positions. The shot Elena took from the standing position was successful, demonstrating that her grandfather's techniques remained relevant even in modern combat scenarios. The engagement was completed quickly and efficiently, allowing Elena to withdraw from the area before the hunter-killer team could respond to the sound of her rifle. The successful shot brought her total to 6 targets, putting her at the halfway point of the exercise with time remaining to complete the remaining objectives. Elena's confidence was growing as she moved toward the 7th target location, but she remained aware that the most challenging portions of the exercise were still ahead. The exercise designers had deliberately structured the challenge to become progressively more difficult, testing the candidate's ability to maintain performance standards even as fatigue and stress accumulated. Elena knew that her physical conditioning and mental preparation would be crucial for completing the remaining objectives successfully. The sound of approaching helicopters cut through the storm as Elena reached the final phase of the ultimate challenge, her grandfather's rifle still functioning flawlessly despite 24 hours of continuous operation in harsh conditions. She had successfully engaged 9 of the 12 targets, placing her well ahead of the competition and demonstrating that her unconventional approach could not only compete with modern methods, but potentially exceed them. The approaching aircraft signaled the arrival of the exercise's climactic challenge, a scenario that would test every skill the candidates had developed over the past 2 months. Elena's position on a rocky outcropping provided an excellent observation point for the valley below, where she could see the final 3 targets positioned in a complex arrangement. That would require rapid engagement and precise shooting. The targets were spaced at different ranges and elevations, creating a scenario that would test the candidate's ability to make quick adjustments while maintaining accuracy under extreme pressure. Elena knew that this final challenge would determine not only her success in the exercise but also her reputation within the Marine Corps' sniper community. The helicopter insertion brought with it a new element of realism that elevated the exercise from a training scenario to something approaching actual combat conditions. Elena could see figures rappelling from the aircraft, members of an opposing force team that would add human intelligence and active resistance to the final phase of the challenge. The addition of thinking, reacting opponents would test the candidates' ability to adapt their tactics in real time while maintaining focus on their primary objectives. Elena's methodical approach to the final targets began with careful reconnaissance of the entire area, using techniques that Carlos had taught her for gathering intelligence in hostile territory. Through her binoculars, she identified not only the 3 target locations, but also the positions of the opposing force members, who were now actively hunting the remaining candidates. The tactical situation was complex, requiring her to balance aggressive pursuit of objectives with careful attention to her own security. The first of the final targets was positioned at 1,100 meters, near the maximum effective range of Elena's rifle and requiring precise calculation of ballistic factors under challenging conditions. The shot would test her ability to engage targets at extended range while under observation by hostile forces, a scenario that replicated the conditions scout snipers faced in actual combat operations. Elena's preparation for the shot involved every technique Carlos had taught her about long-range precision shooting. Elena's successful engagement of the 10th target demonstrated that her grandfather's rifle could perform at the limits of its designed capabilities when handled by a skilled marksman. The shot had been observed by multiple exercise supervisors, who noted the precision and confidence with which Elena had executed the engagement, despite the challenging conditions. The successful shot brought Elena within 2 targets of completing the exercise, but she knew that the remaining objectives would be the most difficult of the entire challenge. The 11th target was positioned in a location that would require Elena to expose herself to potential detection while making the shot, testing her ability to balance tactical considerations with mission requirements. The target was located in an area where the opposing force had established observation posts, creating a scenario where Elena would need to use all her fieldcraft skills to avoid detection while completing the engagement. The challenge was exactly the type of situation that scout snipers faced in real combat operations. Elena's approach to the 11th target involved a complex infiltration that took her through terrain that was under active surveillance by the opposing force. She used movement techniques that Carlos had developed during his service in the Pacific Theater, emphasizing patience and careful observation over speed and aggression. The techniques were time-consuming but effective, allowing her to reach a firing position without being detected by the experienced Marines who were hunting her. The shot Elena took at the 11th target was one of the most challenging of her military career, requiring her to engage an objective at 900 meters while positioned in an unstable shooting position and under potential observation by hostile forces. The engagement tested every aspect of her training, from her ability to read environmental conditions to her skill at maintaining composure under extreme stress. Elena's successful completion of the shot demonstrated that her grandfather's methods could perform under the most demanding conditions. The 12th and final target represented the culmination of the ultimate challenge, positioned in a location that would test the candidate's ability to make precise shots while under direct fire from the opposing force. The scenario was designed to simulate the conditions scout snipers might face when tasked with eliminating high-value targets in heavily defended positions. Elena's approach would need to be perfect, as any mistake would result in failure at the moment of potential triumph. Elena's reconnaissance of the final target area revealed that the opposing force had established a sophisticated defense around the objective, with multiple observation posts and interlocking fields of fire that would challenge any candidate attempting to complete the engagement. The tactical situation was the most complex of the entire exercise, requiring Elena to use every skill she had developed over years of training and combat experience. The solution Elena developed for the final target was based on a technique her grandfather had used during the Battle of Okinawa, when he had been tasked with eliminating a Japanese officer who was positioned in a heavily fortified bunker. Carlos had used misdirection and superior marksmanship to create an opportunity for a successful engagement, demonstrating that individual skill and tactical innovation could overcome technological disadvantages. Elena decided to apply similar principles to her current situation. Elena's final approach took her through terrain that placed her at maximum risk of detection, but also provided the only viable shooting position for engaging the 12th target. She moved with the patience and precision that Carlos had taught her, using every piece of natural cover and concealment available while maintaining awareness of the opposing force positions. The infiltration took over an hour to complete, but Elena knew that careful preparation was essential for success. The final shot of the ultimate challenge would be taken at 1,200 meters, the maximum effective range of Elena's rifle, and a distance that would test the limits of both her equipment and her abilities. The target was positioned to require precise calculation of multiple environmental factors, including wind speed, temperature, and atmospheric pressure. Elena's preparation for the shot involved every technique Carlos had taught her about extreme range. Precision shooting. Elena's position for the final shot was exposed to potential observation by the opposing force, but it provided the only angle from which the 12th target could be engaged. She knew that she would have only seconds to complete the engagement before her position was compromised, requiring her to execute the shot with perfect precision and minimal preparation time. The pressure was enormous, but Elena had learned to convert stress into focus, using the intensity of the moment to sharpen her concentration. The moment of truth arrived as Elena settled into her final shooting position, her grandfather's rifle steady in her hands despite the challenging conditions. The shot would determine not only her success in the ultimate challenge, but also her place in Marine Corps' history as potentially the first woman to complete the KIFA Advanced Sniper School using traditional equipment and methods. Elena's finger found the trigger with the smooth motion that had become automatic through years of practice, preparing to take the shot that would define her military career. The wind was gusting unpredictably, creating conditions that would challenge even the most sophisticated ballistic computers. But Elena felt confident in her ability to read the environmental signs that Carlos had taught her to interpret. She had spent the past 24 hours proving that old-school methods could compete with modern technology, and this final shot would be the ultimate test of that philosophy. Elena's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that preceded every important shot of her career, her body finding the natural stability that would allow her to execute the engagement with precision. The opposing force had begun to close in on Elena's position, their movement patterns indicating that they had identified her general location and were attempting to prevent her from completing the final engagement. Elena knew that she would have only one opportunity to take the shot, as any delay would result in her position being compromised and her elimination from the exercise. The pressure was intense, but Elena had learned to thrive under such conditions, using the stress as motivation rather than allowing it to interfere with her performance. The crack of Elena's final shot echoed across the valley like thunder, cutting through the storm and the chaos of the opposing forces' advance. Through her iron sights, she watched the 12th target indicator snap down, confirming the successful completion of the ultimate challenge at 1,200 meters under conditions that had pushed both her equipment and her abilities to their absolute limits. The shot had been perfect, finding its mark despite wind gusts that exceeded 20 miles per hour and visibility that challenged even the most experienced marksman. Elena immediately began her tactical withdrawal from the exposed position, following procedures that Carlos had drilled into her during their countless training sessions. The opposing force was closing in on her location, their shouts and radio communications indicating that they had identified her position and were attempting to prevent her escape. Elena's movement was swift but controlled, using natural terrain features to break contact with the pursuing Marines while maintaining the disciplined approach that had served her. Throughout the exercise, the GPS beacon on Elena's equipment activated automatically as she crossed the extraction boundary, signaling the successful completion of all 12 target engagements and officially ending her participation in the ultimate challenge. The electronic signal would alert the exercise supervisors to her success, but Elena knew that the real validation would come from the reactions of her fellow candidates and the instructors who had witnessed her performance over the past 48 hours. Elena's extraction point was located at a clearing where helicopters would collect the candidates who had completed the exercise, but she was the first to arrive at the designated location. The solitude gave her time to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the initial skepticism about her equipment choices to the successful demonstration that traditional methods could not only compete with modern technology, but potentially exceeded under challenging conditions. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder as Elena waited at the extraction point, her grandfather's rifle still functioning flawlessly despite 2 days of continuous operation in harsh environmental conditions. She had fired 37 rounds during the exercise, each shot carefully aimed and precisely placed, demonstrating the accuracy that had made her grandfather legendary among Marine marksmen. The rifle showed no signs of malfunction or degradation, proving that quality engineering and robust construction could outperform sophistication when reliability was paramount. The first helicopter to arrive carried Chief Warrant Officer Morrison and several other exercise supervisors, their expressions revealing nothing about Elena's performance or the results of the other candidates. Morrison's professional demeanor maintained the suspense that had characterized the entire advanced sniper school, but Elena caught a slight nod of acknowledgement as he recorded her successful completion of the exercise on his evaluation form. Elena's debriefing with the exercise supervisors was thorough and professional, covering every aspect of her performance from target engagement techniques to tactical movement and field craft. The supervisors' questions revealed their interest in her methods, particularly her ability to read environmental conditions without electronic assistance and her success in evading the hunter-killer team using traditional concealment techniques. Elena answered their questions honestly and completely, sharing the techniques that Carlos had taught her while maintaining the professional demeanor expected of a Marine. The arrival of the second helicopter brought 3 more candidates who had successfully completed the exercise, including Staff Sergeant Kim and Corporal Martinez, both of whom looked exhausted but satisfied with their performance. Their equipment showed signs of the harsh conditions they had endured, with electronic systems that had suffered water damage and mechanical components that required immediate maintenance. The contrast with Elena's rifle, which remained in perfect working condition, was immediately apparent to everyone present. Sergeant Webb was among the candidates who arrived on the third helicopter, his expensive equipment partially disassembled and his expression revealing the frustration of someone who had not achieved his expected level of performance. His custom rifle had suffered multiple malfunctions during the exercise, forcing him to rely on backup systems that had compromised his accuracy and slowed his progress through the target sequence. The irony of his situation was not lost on the other candidates, who had witnessed his earlier confidence in technological superiority. The final helicopter brought the remaining candidates and the news that 4 Marines had been eliminated from the exercise, their GPS beacons activated when They were detected by the hunter-killer team or failed to complete their target engagements within the time limit. The elimination rate was consistent with the Advanced Sniper School's reputation for maintaining the highest standards, ensuring that only the most capable candidates earned the Scout Sniper designation. Elena's performance statistics were announced during the group debriefing, revealing that she had achieved the highest overall score in the exercise while using equipment that most candidates had considered obsolete. Her accuracy rate was perfect, with all 12 targets engaged successfully on the first shot, and her movement time between positions was among the fastest recorded. The results silenced the skeptics who had questioned her methods and validated the training that Carlos had provided decades earlier. Morrison's evaluation of Elena's performance was delivered with the measured tone of someone who had seen exceptional achievements throughout his career, but recognized something truly special. Staff Sergeant Vasquez demonstrated that fundamental marksmanship skills and tactical knowledge can overcome technological disadvantages when applied with discipline and precision, he stated. Her performance exemplifies the Marine Corps' values of adaptability, resourcefulness, and excellence under pressure. The reaction of Elena's fellow candidates to her success was mixed, with some expressing genuine admiration for her achievement, while others struggled to accept that their modern equipment had been outperformed by a rifle manufactured before their parents were born. Webb's response was particularly subdued, his earlier confidence replaced by the quiet reflection of someone whose assumptions had been fundamentally challenged by reality. Elena's success in the ultimate challenge had implications that extended beyond her individual achievement, demonstrating that the Marine Corps' emphasis on individual skill and tactical knowledge remained relevant in an era of increasing technological sophistication. Her performance had proven that properly trained Marines could achieve exceptional results with basic equipment, a lesson that would influence sniper training protocols for years to come. The formal ceremony that followed the exercise included the presentation of the Scout Sniper Badge to Elena and the other successful candidates. But Elena's achievement carried special significance as the first woman to complete the Advanced Sniper School using traditional equipment and methods. Morrison's presentation speech acknowledged both her individual excellence and the broader implications of her success for the Marine Corps' sniper community. Elena's post-exercise interview with Morrison revealed his personal connection to her grandfather's legacy and his recognition of the value in preserving traditional skills alongside modern innovations. "Your grandfather would be proud of what you've accomplished," Morrison told her. "You've honored his memory while proving that the fundamentals of marksmanship remain unchanged regardless of technological advances." The weapons maintenance session that followed the ceremony provided Elena with the opportunity to demonstrate her rifle's condition to the other candidates, revealing that the M1 Garand had functioned flawlessly throughout the exercise, despite conditions that had caused multiple failures in more modern systems. The demonstration was educational for the other Marines, showing them the value of robust engineering and proper maintenance procedures. Elena's reflection on her achievement was tempered by the knowledge that her success represented more than individual accomplishment. She had proven that excellence could be achieved through dedication to fundamental principles rather than reliance on technological shortcuts, a lesson that would serve her well in future assignments. Her grandfather's training had prepared her not just for this specific challenge, but for a career built on the foundation of proven techniques and unwavering standards. The impact of Elena's success extended beyond the Advanced Sniper School to influence Marine Corps' training doctrine and equipment procurement decisions. Her demonstration that traditional methods could outperform modern technology under challenging conditions prompted a reevaluation of the balance between innovation and proven techniques in military training programs. The lesson was clear: technology should enhance human capability rather than replace the fundamental skills that define military excellence. Elena's achievement had established her as more than just a successful candidate. She had become a symbol of the Marine Corps' commitment to excellence regardless of gender, background, or equipment preferences. Her success proved that ability and dedication could overcome any obstacle, inspiring future generations of Marines to pursue their goals with the same determination and skill that had characterized her grandfather's generation. 6 months after her graduation from the Advanced Sniper School, Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood before a new class of Marine candidates at the Scout Sniper Training Facility in Camp Pendleton, California. Her grandfather's M1 Garand rested on the display rack beside her, its weathered wooden stock and battle-scarred metal telling the story of 3 generations of military service. The rifle had become as much a teaching tool as a weapon, demonstrating to young Marines that excellence transcended technological advancement and that fundamental skills remained the foundation of military success. Elena's new role as a senior instructor at the facility represented a significant shift in Marine Corps' sniper training philosophy, driven largely by her exceptional performance at Quantico and the lessons learned from her success with traditional equipment. The Corps had recognized that her achievement was more than an individual accomplishment. It was a validation of training methods that had proven effective across multiple conflicts and generations of Marines. Her appointment to the instructor position reflected the military's commitment to preserving proven techniques while embracing beneficial innovations. The classroom filled with 43 candidates from across the Marine Corps, each one having earned their place through exceptional marksmanship scores and demonstrated leadership potential. Elena surveyed the assembled Marines, noting the mixture of confidence, nervousness, and determination that characterized every new class. Carlos had been more than a skilled marksman. He had been a teacher who had understood that knowledge was meant to be shared rather than hoarded. Elena's success in passing on his techniques to new generations of Marines represented the fulfillment of his vision for preserving essential skills while adapting them to contemporary challenges. The rifle that had started Elena's journey as a symbol of obsolescence had become an icon of excellence, displayed in the Marine Corps Museum as an example of the enduring value of quality craftsmanship and proper training. Visitors to the museum could see the weapon that had challenged assumptions about the relationship between technology and capability, while reading the story of the Marine who had used it to redefine the standards of sniper training. Elena's influence on Marine Corps culture extended beyond sniper training to encompass broader questions about the balance between tradition and innovation in military service. Her success had demonstrated that excellence could be achieved through dedication to proven principles, encouraging other Marines to question assumptions about the necessity of technological advancement and the value of traditional skills. The impact of her achievement was being felt throughout the Marine Corps, inspiring a new generation of Marines to pursue excellence through fundamental competence rather than technological dependence. The students who had graduated from Elena's program were now serving in operational units around the world, carrying with them the skills and principles that Carlos had developed and Elena had refined. Their success in combat operations provided ongoing validation of the training methods that had been passed down through 3 generations of military service, ensuring that the legacy would continue to influence future Marines long after Elena's own career had ended. Elena's reflection on her journey from skeptical candidate to respected instructor revealed the profound impact that individual determination and family legacy could have on military service and personal achievement. Her story had become part of Marine Corps tradition, inspiring future generations to pursue excellence regardless of the obstacles they might face. The rifle her grandfather had carried through World War II had become a symbol of continuity between past and present, connecting Elena to a tradition of excellence that transcended technological change and demonstrated the enduring value of fundamental skills and unwavering dedication to the highest standards of military service. The auditorium that had witnessed Elena's triumph was now quiet, But the influence of her presentation would continue to shape military training programs for years to come. Her achievement had proven that individual excellence could overcome any technological disadvantage, inspiring military professionals around the world to reconsider their assumptions about the relationship between equipment and capability. Elena's story had become a testament to the power of proven principles, family legacy, and unwavering commitment to excellence in military service. Years later, as Elena stood in her office at the Marine Corps Sniper Training Command, she received a letter from a young woman in basic training who had heard her story. The letter was simple but profound. "Gunnery Sergeant Vasquez, they told me I wasn't cut out for this, that I should find something easier. But I remembered what you proved with your grandfather's rifle. It's not about having the newest equipment or fitting in with everyone else. It's about having the skill and determination to see what others miss." Elena smiled as she read those words, remembering her grandfather's voice echoing across the Arizona desert. "It's not about being seen, Mia. It's about seeing what others miss." The lesson had traveled through generations, from a World War II veteran to his granddaughter, and now to countless Marines who would carry that wisdom into their own battles. The M1 Garand still sat in its place of honor in Elena's office, its weathered wood and battle-scarred metal telling a story that would never end. New Marines would come, new challenges would arise, and new technology would promise easier solutions. But the fundamental truth remained unchanged. Excellence isn't about having the best equipment. It's about having the heart to prove yourself when everyone else counts you out. Elena's legacy wasn't just about one woman who outshot an entire team with an ancient rifle. It was about the courage to be different, the strength to stand alone, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the oldest lessons are the most powerful ones. In a world obsessed with the latest and greatest, Elena had proven that the greatest weapon of all was the refusal to accept limitations that others tried to place on you. What seemed impossible became inevitable when skill met determination, when legacy met opportunity, and when one Marine decided that being underestimated was simply another form of tactical advantage. If this story inspired you to see beyond limitations and recognize that true excellence comes from within, hit that subscribe button and join our community of everyday heroes. Share your own stories of overcoming doubt and proving the critics wrong in the comments below. What ancient skills or unconventional approaches have you used to achieve the impossible? Your story might be the inspiration someone else needs to keep pushing forward. Remember, it's not about having the best equipment, it's about having the best mindset. Subscribe now and become part of a community that believes in the power of determination over technology, skill over shortcuts, and heart over everything else.